Okay, it's gonna have dot 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 dot, and it's just gonna make dots for a long time. And you think, what is it doing? It's not done yet. Even though it says all commands completed successfully, you got to let it finish
Okay.
because after those 50 rows of dots that it's gonna have, it's gonna come up and say something about completed or completed successfully or something like that, even though it already said it before. So the force prep, let it go. Don't try and close it. Don't, yeah, just let it go. It'll let you know when it's done, and it'll stop making those dots. So the dots, I've run this force prep before, but it's been years because small business server, you don't really have to do this stuff. It's done for you. Um, but let the dots finished. Now, if for some reason you did close it and killed the command line, close the window, you could go back and run the force prep command again, and it'll finish. It won't kill your server. You can go back and run it again, and it'll finish. Um,
Phew. Thank God.
yeah, yeah, right. Um, so then there's a few more commands to type. They're all the same 80 prep 32 with different switches. The first one's force prep. The next one's domain prep. Domain prep take a second to run. Then there's domain prep slash GP prep done in a few seconds. And then RODC prep done in a few seconds. The last three took a total of 30 seconds at most. The force prep took a little while longer, maybe 5, 10 minutes. It seems like a long time when you're just watching dots go across the screen.
Hmm.
And you're thinking, is it done yet?
Yeah. Like, did I do it right?
Right. So it's not done. Let it finish. Um, so once that's done, now you can actually take the 2008 R2 server and make it a domain controller on the network. Um, and the way this, of course, is just DC promo. You're going to run DC promo. You're going to go through a few screens, and these screens are well documented on this site. Um, so that's not that long of a process. It's a few screens. And it's going to want to reboot. But remember, nobody's on this thing yet. They're still logging in and authenticating to the old server, so you can reboot this one without affecting anybody. Once that's done, I did that at the end of the day. It's going to replicate Active Directory over because now it's a domain controller. It's also by default in which you want it to be a DNS server and a global catalog server because in the end that's what we want. So by default, those are already checked when you run this thing to do it. So Active Directory will replicate, DNS will replicate, so this thing can now be a DNS server. It's going to reboot, and that's the end of that step. Pretty easy. Now the next step is transfer the DHCP service. Now this one, at least in the environment I was in, I had to do a lot of cleanup on this too. So what I did was I look at the old DHCP scope. I took screenshots of everything, screenshots of all the reservations, screenshots of the scope of the excluded IPs, and I had to figure out what was valid and what was not valid still. Because the reservations, once they're active, it'll just say active forever. You might have had a printer a year ago, but it still says reservation active.
Oh,
But
that sucks.
yeah, it may not be there. So the first thing I did is all the reservations, I just see if I could ping them
Good job.
and if they were still valid. Most of them were. The few that I couldn't get responses for, I had to do a lookup on them and see, okay, is this printer valid anymore? Basically, they're a bunch of printers. Some things I got response from, but I could tell. No, I'm sorry. If I got responses from them, if they're printers, I just put the IP in the browser to see if I get the web interface for the printer and if it's the right one that I think it's supposed to be. There was a few IPs I could not ping that had reservations that said active. I had to verify with the users, no, that's gone, so I can kill that reservation or not recreate it. I didn't want to. Yeah, I actually killed it. I didn't want to recreate on the new one. There was some IPs that I actually did angry IP scanner which is a cool tool.
Nice tool. Love that tool.
I ran that on the network, and I wanted to see what addresses were taken. So I compared what that came back with as far as live IPs to what I had in DHCP. So there were some IPs that had something on them that weren't a reservation, and they weren't in my list of static IPs because sometimes you can't use a reservation. There's no option for it. Some camera systems, they only have space for a static IP. So when I had to give out a static IP, I put it in the exclusion for DHCP, and I have a file that I put it on there. This exclusion is for this device. So I'm going through and comparing what's returned live as a valid IP and what's in my list, what's in DHCP. And I found a few addresses that had apparently IPs assigned to them that I didn't know about. Of course, so now I want to look up these. So on a few of these, I ran a little command, arp-a, and then the IP address. You'll get the MAC address when you do that. Because of course, if you ask the customer, what is this device? They have no clue. No clue. There's 6 buildings on campus. There's 70 users, but hundreds of people, different people who don't necessarily need a computer, all kind of people doing things. No one knows what's going on. So once I get the MAC address with this, there's a you can do a search online. Any MAC address lookup tool, you can key in the MAC address or the first 6 digits of the MAC address, and you find out what the vendor is. This is sometimes helpful. A few of my, I like one of them was Tokyo Electronics, and I said I need y'all to find this. It says Tokyo Electronics. Oh, I know what that is, but before that they didn't know what it was. So that may be helpful, may not be. It's just the vendor. Whatever that MAC address, that's the vendor assigned portion of the MAC address. So once I got all that straightened out, I found out what's valid, found out what's not valid. Recreated the DHCP scope on the new server with the scope I wanted, with the exclusions, and with the reservations that I wanted on the new service. Now, I didn't activate it yet, and it'll tell you to do this in this article, not to activate it. We just created it for now.
Now, when you say activate, what does that mean for them?
Okay, so we can create everything on there, just to activate. So it's not actually giving out any addresses.
There you go. Yep.
It's not. It's a DHCP service that's basically disabled. Because in this article it explains small business server, the default lease time is
8 days.
8 days. 8 days. Yeah, 8 days. So what that means is if I give someone an address right now, that device isn't going to check back for 4 days.
Right.
Because it checks when the lease is halfway over. It checks to try and renew when it's halfway over. If it can't renew, then it checks halfway over again. So 2 days later, it checks again. So every half period, it starts checking. So what it wants you to do in this article, which is a good idea, it tells you to go into the scope of the O3 server, delete all the leases. Now be careful, because if you delete the reservations, even though you're in the column for address leases, and reservations is a separate below it, but the reservations show up under leases as active or inactive. If you delete reservations under address leases, it deletes the reservation also. So if you just hit the little sort by, you can see it'll sort by reservations. But I think it's lease expires. You hit that little column and to put all the reservations together, and you can just highlight all the other addresses and just delete. So that way you're leaving your reservations, but you're deleting the ones that do not have reservations. And what's going to happen is they're going to try back for an address right away. And when they try back right away, now their lease is good for 2 hours. I set it for 2 hours. I let that go overnight. I did that like at 5:30. Let that go over, and I right away you can see people getting leases again. Um, the next morning, I checked back. Everybody got addresses, but there was some that said bad address in DHCP, address already in use, which I'd found some more devices that had static IPs. So the server tried to give that IP address out, but someone else already said, no, I already have that address.
Gotcha.
Because the way DHCP works is, well, the back and forth is the client says, I want an address. The server says, okay, I want to give you this address. So it broadcasts it out saying, I want to give this guy this address. Does anybody have this address already? And somebody does, the device replies back with a DHCP. I think it's, anyways, DHCP acknowledge request.
It's the ACK, I think.
Yeah. So it's sent back saying, no, I already have that address. You can't give that address out. So then it comes up as bad address in DHCP, meaning somebody already has it. It's in the scope. I'm trying to give it out, but somebody else has it already. So we had to resolve those. Just a couple of those. I just deleted. I found those and took care of them, and then deleted the bad addresses. But anyway, at the end is everybody's now got an address that has a lease of 2 hours. So every hour they're going to be checking back for a new address. So it didn't matter when. Whenever I got around to it later in that morning, I just went into the new server and activated it and disabled DHCP on the O3 server. So I just deactivated the scope and then disabled the service so it won't try and start again. And if everything works right, the client should notice the thing. An hour later, they'll try and renew. It'll say, oh, here you go, here's an address. Now, most of them will even renew with the same address because what it does is it says, hey, I'm using this address, can I keep using it?
Right.
And if nobody has it, it says, yeah, go ahead. But now the lease is given to it by the new server. So in the end, what you have is you've got DHCP and DNS running on the new server. But this article goes through all that step by step. You can't get confused on this. It's very easy. I'm not sure how many people are going to be doing small business server to straight server, but I have 2 scheduled right now. I'm doing one, and we got another one next week.
Well, taking a peek at the article, I mean, if you want to set up 2 virtual machines, and you can or one, you can definitely do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing because it's not uncommon for small businesses to outgrow their servers over time.
Sure.
So if somebody has, now if you have 5 users, I doubt they're gonna. Well, then maybe they will. But this company had 25, 30 users 4 years ago. Now they're at 70. So they're too big for their server. And another client who's got a small business server, they're only about 50, but they have plans for growth. So it's time for a new server. Well, we told them about the limit. They don't want the limit. They're going with the straight server. So it's another migration to do to straight server. Now, I don't usually like migrations at all, but I don't like migrations from small business server to small business server because small business server is kind of unique, has some strange things that it can and can't do. For instance, if you're migrating from small business server to small business server, you've got to actually install small business server, the new one, on site. You have to install it in migration mode. And that messes up a lot. It's not uncommon to have to restore their main server back to where it was because something messes up. Just like we ran the earlier, we ran the domain prep and force prep tools. When you're putting this new, let's say, small business server 2011 in migration mode, it makes some changes to Active Directory. And if it messes up, your source server messes up too. So you have to restore it. And that's happened more than once that it messed up and we had to restore the source server back and try it again. And this is all stuff done on site. I hate doing the stuff on site.
And when you say we restore the source server, you're talking about the system state?
Yes, system state. So, of course, make sure you have a backup of system state before. I have a backup of everything before we do anything migration.
Sure. It's a good idea.
And then right before I do it, I did a